Scott, directly in Scotland, I'm doing 14 days in a hotel.
Okay.
So I went to London. Through another property.
Yeah,
And then I can cross the border.
Yeah, you had your vaccinations.
I hadn't at that time, but yeah, so
5 to 5 is usually about the time I remember.
to get into the country, you had to buy a antigen test. On day 2, you get a test. Then on day 8, you got a test. And then shortly after that, when I was leaving, I had to test and get the.
I know, that's
I
right.
know a lot of the airlines.
Anyway, you were marvelous. I mean, you didn't really know.
Well, I don't know where they're required.
Oh,
for
so
them.
you can't
They
get counsel.
I sent you the audio.
Yeah,
I saw you looking at me, I'm going, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I already told him he did great twice. You're a private business.
No, that was so
I
very
think
impressive.
they could depend on that. Because they're in the UK, it's a civil aeronautics course, what have you, they have rules on it. What you can and can't do.
United Delta.
Well, I think part of it is just
Just like getting out
the
of
history. You know,
Yeah,
how did we get here? I mean, every one of these little things was beaten to death before.
Just
got
go
this
ask,
far.
go ask Kathy if she has.
My grandson's getting ready.
You come to the two of them and ask that question. I think that'd be a
about
really
that.
good.
We should do that.
Yeah.
They may be inside the United States, but they're going to do it internationally.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Pretty cool.
And even if you have vaccines, you still have.
I'm home during the day.
Let's say thank you. We'll put you on.
Yeah.
They're just asking our stuff.
Oh, can you get here?
That's Fred.
Just about 4 or 3, 4.
So we need one more?
What do we have, 6?
We got
You're
6.
moving good.
So we're good.
Do you think
We have
how
10
much
members,
more
so
not
6 is the
being
majority.
This is for your kids.
Jeff is out of the country. Jeff
Thank
James.
you. Thank you. I'm glad you're doing so well.
So
with
he
that.
can Zoom.
Thank you.
He said he won't.
I think he's in Greece. Yeah, so it's 4 a.m. He's just going to bed. It'll be just right.
Who are you talking about?
Jeff James, I think he's in Greece.
Where's his dedication?
He's just 6 hours ahead of us, it's not that long.
So I thought, I didn't know how
At
far.
10 o'clock at night.
But then we don't want to talk to him because I know what he's doing.
A little bit of Retsina.
He's drinking a little Ouzo if he's in Greece.
We downstate this guy coming from the post office.
It's a fun place to live.
So the last thing that really comes up for solutions. What is
Animal.
Athens, Greece.
That's what I remember.
I was in my early 20s and spent almost 2 years.
Years ago, I came across this software that was really cool. We had to have basically
A 6-ship squadron of destroyers homeport
pre
Retsina, just off Pirates.
ancestors of hypermarine stuff, basically documents and run it through this process.
Pirates is the port.
Hey, how are you doing? Good. I know, it's been, oh yeah, it's true. You started in 2020. That's good. Good.
Run through so you
Good to get away.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Glad to be back.
launch.
You always have one.
But then you go back.
Well, that's the thing, you go away for a week, and then you just gotta back a lot of stuff.
I know, there's no such thing as a vacation. Email and everything that's going on.
It started with at one point in time, it was free for all.
All right, Mr. Grant.
How are you doing, guys?
Good, how about you?
Speaking of historical interest.
That's right.
Tom.
Right, it is 4 o'clock and Mr. Graham is here, so we can call today's meeting of the Harbor Commission to order. Victor, whoever's taking notes, you want roll call, please?
Fred Rockwood. Here. Tim Fletcher Rice.
Here.
Tom Graham.
Here.
Dick Schiller.
Here.
Jim Bartlett.
Here.
Bill McCullough.
Here.
Laura Coors. And Karen Stroud. We are missing Flitka and Jeff, but we do have a quorum.
Great. Do we have anybody calling in on Zoom from the commission?
Nope, just so you guys know, we have a camera now and better audio, so that's the new addition to this room. So you will be on camera better than you were before.
Do we want to add that debate to the agenda? First item is the approval of minutes from our special meeting of April 22nd, 21. Were there any changes or corrections? I have a couple. First of all, number 2, we approved the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, March 24th, not 26th
Okay.
in there.
Sorry, Mike. Let me get it back up. It was not loading.
And then second of all, in the section A, review the Marina Park Committee plans, the last paragraph, it reads, Bartlett mentioned that based on projected incremental profits in the waterfront fund. I think what I actually said was, Bartlett mentioned that based on current city budgeting practices in the waterfront fund, because it isn't a lack of revenue we're dealing with, it's where the revenue we're making is going. That was my point. Those are my two. Anybody else got anything else?
I had a minor nit in the very, like,
Are you doing a Regan thing?
yes, or the very first, under A, typically when you introduce of somebody's name
Hey,
into a
Flicka made it.
document, you
Thank
use
you.
Bill Mulder the first time that it shows up, and then if you want to just call him Mulder from that point forward, might do that, but it should at least have his first name on the first go. AP style.
Enter Flicka as an attendee, so thank you for coming. Any other corrections?
I have one. It's pretty minor. It's kind of after the fact, but under A on page 1, regarding my email outlining my questions about the plan and concerns, I didn't really have any concern about the loss of parking spaces. I know this is a new point because it's already been decided, but I just want to clarify, I did not have any concerns about losing parking spaces for the Harbor Eats.
Right, we can strike that. Anything else?
I did receive a comment from Jeff James saying he believes he didn't attend by Zoom and wasn't here in person, but I'm pretty sure Jeff was by Zoom, but it doesn't matter. He was here in attendance, so.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I have them here. Oh, no, I have them on phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, if no other corrections, I can hearing none, I entertain a motion to accept as amended.
Make the motion.
Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same for opposed. Thanks. And Victor, these were the best 7 minutes we've had in,
Appreciate
A while.
yeah, thanks, Bill. Really, that was well done. So thank you. Approval of the agenda. There was an item that we received early this afternoon that I didn't receive until I got here. And maybe even Bill didn't get it either, I don't think. From Victor dated June 9th that wanted to add talking about launch ramp fees at Ford Park.
Chair, this was under the F new business Ford Park usage update. If in my email to you originally, I said council is going to discuss this on Monday, June 7th, and that I would have an update for you once council discussed it.
Right, but this isn't an update of what was discussed. This was, as I read this, you're asking us for a fair amount of, and we haven't had any time to
Oh, no, I
really
know.
look at it. Now, I'm not saying we don't want to discuss it. I just, nobody's had a chance to really review this. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
So the question is, do we want to add that to the agenda? Do what we can with it and postpone what we can to July, or should we, what's everybody comfortable with doing?
Well,
Because nobody's had a chance to really look at this.
if there's something to learn a little bit about why it's here, and then I would postpone. There's a lot of questions, so I would wait till July to make any kind of recommendations or gather our data, but I sure would love to know more about it. So that's me.
I agree with that as well. I mean, in terms of history of how the fees were originally set.
Yeah, we can cover some of that today.
Yeah, and like I looked at the budget for the waterfront area, and there's one item there for launch ramp fees. Is that what we're talking about here? And estimate looks like $12,000 for 21. Is that right? Is that right? So that's where that money comes from. Is that enough to operate the launch is what my question would be.
Well, let's, for the benefit of the new folks on council and also maybe for the benefit of the new folks on this commission, we can talk a little bit about this historically and see what we can get done. My point is that it's tough for any commission to get a list of questions they want answered from anybody 2 hours before the meeting and then expect a final answer.
No, I don't expect a final answer.
I think we'll add that to the agenda. Everybody okay with the agenda as is then? All right, good. Public comment on anything not related on the agenda today? Oh, come on, people. It's a beautiful day. Must have something you want to say.
I've got something.
Your part's down toward the end.
Was that right?
Go ahead.
There was a presentation by the Tip of the Net Watershed Council in, it was initially scheduled for April 14th, but it actually was April 28th. It was a presentation on the state rules on, harbors and getting docks permitted and that kind of thing. I'm wondering if anyone here else listened to it. It is available, I guess, online at their website, and they are going to do continuing, education in that field. So I thought it was something the members of this commission should be aware of. But it's sponsored by the Tip of the Net Watershed Council. So just for your general information.
Why don't you give that to Victor, maybe he can email it out to the commission.
Okay,
We'll go
that
from
would be
there.
great.
Thank you for bringing that in. Thank you. Old business. First item up is Marina Park Committee update.
That's Jeff. So the land, we had a contractor come and try to, improve the grass by adding more seed, and then they're gonna come back to apply some sort of organic herbicide to eventually get rid of the weeds there as many as they can as possible. So we're making improvements on the grass. That's been done. We've ordered the new tables and benches that are gonna be installed. The shade sails aren't gonna be going in. There was just a little misunderstanding, and now it's too kind of late to get the shade sails put in. The umbrellas are in, so we'll probably put those umbrellas in soon on some of the tables for shade. Landscaping has been done. I'm sure if some of you walked by there, you've seen some of that landscaping in.
I think it looks great, personally.
We're gonna add a few more flowers, and the flower beds just add a little more color, but it's almost done there. And then we cut down that tree, that big spruce tree, so that's gone, that landmark, it's gone. That's a joke. But anyway, we're making some headway there. We have a dock box that we put, we're using a dock box to store the games that they have for play. So we have ordered those games are in, they'll be stored in a dock box, and just a few more loose ends here and there, but it's coming together. So our next Marina Park Committee meeting is next Wednesday to kind of talk about some things. Harbor Eats area is going to be on the grass. We haven't had any applications yet from any restaurants, but we've had a couple express interest that they might turn in their applications in the next couple of weeks. So that's what I have. Any questions?
Any comments about what's been done from commissioners down there?
Well, I think
I like
it
the
sounds
landscape.
great.
So.
I think it's great.
Thanks.
You're a good man watering the flowers anyway.
We took care of that the other day, put in a soaker line. Yeah. Doing a much better job than I was, that's for sure.
That's not what I heard. I heard someone said you did a great job.
Thanks, Victor.
It didn't come from my bows then.
Next item, quick update on the water level. We all know it's down. The Corps in its latest issuance a couple of days ago indicates we're about 20 inches lower than we were last year, which is amazing when you think about it. And that level should stay pretty static for the next couple of months before it starts to go down again in the fall. So looks like we're over the hump on that for at least 1 year, which is good. Moving on to new business. Yearly in this meeting, we do elections. So I'd open the floor for nominations for a chairman.
I would move that Jim Bartlett is our chairman.
Second?
You sure?
Yeah.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of Bartlett for chairman, please make a donation to the campaign committee and vote yes. Signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same for opposed. Thank you. I will continue to try to do my best for the city. Next up would be vice chairman, and I would move that we re-elect Bill McCullough.
A second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes. Good
Thank you
job.
all very much.
Thank you all, Billy. And we need a secretary, don't we, Victor?
Per the bylaws, the city clerk, well, I guess the city manager, I think I've acted
We had
as.
to appoint Tim at one point in
But
time.
I think,
But
You got stuck with the new
I
guy.
would get out of it because we have a new commissioner.
well, you know what, actually, we did amend it to have someone appointed secretary, but we do the minutes anyway, but yes.
So then I nominate Karen.
It's an honorary position at this point.
It's fine if I don't have to do anything. I'll do it.
Basically, what I do
It's
is,
honorary today.
person in city staff that touches the minutes just shares it with you to make any edits to the minutes, if there's any spelling corrections, or et cetera. And so then you send it back to us when it comes to council. That way, we catch little mistakes like that were caught earlier.
Okay,
I would support that because we need a second for Tim's motion.
Second.
Okay, you can support it. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same for opposed. Welcome.
I'd say thank you for the honor, I think. No, it goes to the newbie, huh? Give it to the newbie.
Next item on new business is Ford Park usage update. Victor, why don't you daylight this? I guess this went to council Monday or came out of council Monday, so.
Yeah, so on the May 17th council meeting, Councilmember Rondella requested that we, at our June 7th council meeting, review the launch ramp permit fee rates and, try to find some rationales why they're set the way they are, and is there any data for supporting that rationale, and, have a discussion about that. So council discussed that, probably a good discussion. There was a lot of feedback on.
So that was brought at the May meeting.
Yes, it was brought as under new business, new member comments. So it wasn't a new business item, it was just a comment to bring it up to June 7th meeting. And we discussed it at the council meeting, and council would like Harbor Commission's input on, I guess, some of the history of the launch permit, launch ramp permit rates. I think at one of the previous Harbor Commissions, when we raised rates last year for the commercial launch permit fees, we possibly discussed looking at data for how many times maybe IDS or some of our other commercial users use that, and we never really went anywhere with that. So that was one idea talked about. So basically, I came out of that meeting with a few questions, summary questions, and answers that council is looking for. And one of them is, what is the rationale for even having launch ramp permit fees? I looked back at some of the minutes, and for me, it was pretty obvious that some of the rationale for having fees anyway was to help with maintenance of future maintenance of the launch ramp and Ford Park. So that was pretty clear, but it wasn't really clear as why we established a commercial rate and why that commercial rate is different than a residential rate. I looked back to 2000 to the minutes, and I know we reinstated permit fee, launch ramp fees in the year 2000. Actually, one of the comments was from you, Bartlett, that mean that we hadn't had launch ramp permit fees for years, but prior to that, back in the early 90s, late 80s, there was fees. So it seems like at one point we got rid of them and then they came back. So, but I couldn't really find a good rationale in either the council or the Harbor Commission minutes for why that differentiation between commercial and residential was there. So the purpose for this from a city, I guess, administrative perspective is that we need a justifiable rationale for why we put permit fees. For example, it's justifiable that the reason we issue fees is because in order to operate and maintain that park, we need to collect fees. But we also need a rationale why we're having a different rate from one and the other. So that's kind of something we're trying to flesh out, is what is the rationale for that? The second question, which is related, is, will data help support that rationale? So does the Harbor Commission recommend that we reach out to these commercial license holders to see if they can provide data with how many launches, how many boats that they launch for, and is that necessary? The third question was kind of something that I took from the council members' comments and kind of put it in my packet, was that should we eliminate a commercial rate and instead require each boat owner to pull out a launch permit, whether it's daily or seasonal, regardless of whether or not that boat is being launched by themselves or by a commercial entity? So the commercial entity could pull out that permit for the boat owner, but that each boat owner would have their own launch permit. So there's more nuances to that. It's not as simple as that in some cases, but it was a suggestion I just threw out there to see if there was, if that was satisfied. And council talked about that, but they still want to see Harbor Commission's thoughts on all of these questions, and especially the question of whether or not we should seek data and how about we should go seeking that data. I just also wanted one caveat. I did some research, and our Harbor Commission rules and regulations say that we only should have 2 commercial licenses, but over the years we have granted 4. And so now we have 4 reoccurring licenses, and our harbor rules essentially we only can have 2. So the 4 we have are IBS, Meyer Marine Service, and Wallstrom, and then they haven't pulled out their license this year, but Outfitter. And I see Outfitter and Meyer kind of different commercial operations than IBS and Wallstrom. There's a little difference there, but still they're considered commercial operations. So that's something, a side note that came out of that, but we might want to relook at that and whether we need to change that number or should we stick to 2 and figure out a process for only passing out 2, or reclassifying or redefining how some of these other commercial entities, like the Outfitter, should they be categorized as the same as IBS and Wallstrom, for example, for a commercial license? That's just some thoughts that I have. So that's basically what happened. So council just wants to see Harbor Commission's feedback and their thoughts on ways to move forward with this. That's my.
Bill, let me start.
Yeah.
Victor, it seems like council was looking to educate themselves as to how these fees got set, because I'm choosing to go down that road with this request instead of looking at this as if council is telling Harbor Commission the fees were set willy-nilly without any background.
That wasn't my point of bringing that up was that we don't have a rationale on record in the minutes.
So we have a rationale that's informal, maybe not written down, but we're at the fees we're at and have been because we worked through for reasons that existed as to why we set those up. And I can kind of daylight that, and Bill could chime in and Dick could probably chime in a little bit because the folks who've been around here a bit have some understanding of that. But it's important that council understands, or you understand, that those fees weren't just pulled out of the air. They are a result of looking at what our expenses were, what comparable charges were around the neighborhood for what other marinas charge for this kind of stuff, recognizing our relationship with the state, what our requirements are to meet that. That is built with public money, and we need to factor that into how it goes. And there's also a fair amount of political pressure, not pressure, but input that comes from councils as councils change. And the importance of what they like to see happen down there changes, which we reflect in how we set our things over securely. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we just didn't throw out $5 as a launch ramp fee here. We did some study and we looked at it, we went from there. And I've been around too long probably, but I can remember when we had no fees down there. I remember when we had fees down there and somebody to collect them. I remember when we had gates down there because we got tired, we couldn't staff somebody and make any money because there weren't enough fees generated at what we could charge competitively to pay for the person's time down there. So we put in gates. That was the worst 3 years we ever had at Ford Park. And they stopped when a guy walked into the office when I had Michael's job with a cut on his head, took off his hat, went over my desk and said, "You got to get rid of those gates." So then we got rid of the gates, we got rid of the fees, and then away we went. So there's reasons why what has happened. So for my clarity, is council, there's a commercial aspect to this, which is relatively new. And then there's the residential use that happens with a guy who comes up with a boat. Is council unhappy with, or wants to know why we are where we are with both of those? Because I sense more of it's directed toward those commercial things.
Well, I think I don't know if necessarily they're unhappy. They want to see if it's fair, if the rates that are there are fair. For example, when we raised the rates last year for the commercial license, we didn't raise it based off anything other than, well, we feel they probably should be paying more. We don't know what that number is, but we'll double it. So when we came to that rationale.
If Billy, unless you got something you want to jump in, why don't you let me
Carry on.
air out here, and then we can go. On the private citizen usage side of that, we're at $5 and $20 for a seasonal boater, if I remember.
35.
35, yeah, we just. For example, Petoskey is $5 for the same ramp and $25. Charlevoix is $8 and $20. So competitively, we're in the ballpark. There's no doubt about that. Bay Harbor is $10, but you get a cheeseburger at Knott's when you do that. So that's how that works. So that's part of what drives it. There has always been at council level and at this table, because that ramp was built with grant aid money from the state of Michigan. Some matching money with the city, but very little when it came to comparative what that thing costs. And we should keep that at a reasonable number so that our average Joe boater who doesn't have a 65-foot yacht can go down there and for $35 now can launch his boat 100 times and he's happy. And same for the guy who comes into town. It's $5 and away he goes on. And it's clear that other communities feel that generally that's about the right place for that. So I think from the daily usage guy down there, that's why we are where we are. It seems to make sense in the neighborhood and it generates what it generates. If we could charge $50 down there, we probably wouldn't make the $21,000 we've got budgeted for that, because not as many people would go. They'd go to Petoskey, it's $5, and we would irritate all the locals because it was built with public money. So why can't I get a little bit of a break on that? That's kind of a combination of looking at the competitive picture for where our business operates at, and then the political side with folks in town wanting to make sure we take care of our residents as much as we can. The commercial thing is very unique for Harbor Springs, and you don't have to look around the lake to see that we're the only guys that have a public launch ramp in between two private marinas that don't have launch ramps. That got started when the business that the marinas wanted to start doing more business down in there. And it was cumbersome to have the individual own the piece or make sure that the boat trailer had the seasonal ticket on it. But more importantly, there was some political sentiment. And this is when Mr. Dyker was mayor on that, and it was supported at the table, recognizing, because there was a lot of talk going on about how much taxes these two businesses were paying, that maybe this is a way for the city to not bleed the marinas by charging them an excessive amount to use this thing commercially to take care of their folks, which opens up more places for the daily guy to park at that ramp, because their cars aren't parked down there. Irish and Western are in or out. It really makes the place run better. They do offer help to folks when there's in trouble. They help make sure people go in and out. It's a win-win deal for us. So we picked the rate, and I think it was $300 or whatever the number was on that thing. And there wasn't any push from council to count that. There wasn't any push from Harbor Commission to count it, because we recognized the value of what they were doing for our customer. And at that time, politically, it made sense because it helped council solve a tax perception of what was going on in town. So there's some intermixing with that. Now all that stuff has grown as time has gone on. So both marinas are using that more regularly. From my perspective, I still think it's a great thing because they help out down there. All you got to do is look at that place and you see it. And they don't park down there. That place can't get any bigger. There isn't any place to go with that. Our overflow parking can help out, but that's not convenient. So that's the spot. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's kind of the background over the last 30 some years that I've been working, 40 when you count the Harbormaster stuff that I was involved with, as to why we are where we are. And it's important to me that it's communicated to council that all of these things happen because we all deliberated this stuff at the table with input from everybody, and council acted on it when it got to them. And it was a relatively clean process that really wasn't confrontational. And I'm only speaking for myself, but for this to come back to us now asking, well, what'd you guys do? That's kind of how I'm looking at this. And I'm choosing to take the high road on it, but it's a little frustrating. We find out about it 2 hours before a 4 o'clock meeting. I don't think that's probably the best.
JB, that's not fair. I mean, in my original email, I said council's going to discuss this Ford Park usage about this stuff going on at the June 7th meeting. I won't have an idea of what council have said until before this meeting. Not asking to make a decision, but I informed you that council is not going to discuss it on June 7th. So it's not just being thrown out there. And I even emailed you, say you could come to the meeting and talk about that.
I get that.
So
And
on Monday,
I
so
might
you
add
didn't
for
just
not
know about
showing
it
up.
2 hours before this meeting.
But council knew in May that this was going on, and it's, we had, or knew in April.
Yeah. Well, then it was brought up as new business, so now they're asking you
Yeah.
to come to you with these questions. And I don't think it's accusing the Harbor Commission of anything. I think they just want to know how it came to be, and is this fair? And if it's fair, great, then we'll council review that. But if it's not fair, then they want to look at how they can make it fair. So that's why they're here today.
I don't know what happened to council, but for this board to get this right before our meeting's not right, I don't think. Yes,
If I may, there was no overtone to the question that was asked. There was no impugning what the Harbor Commission does. In fact, people, I think, respect and appreciate what the Harbor Commission does. I would ascribe this to the turnover, which I think is a good thing, and to people coming on council that weren't there at the time or haven't come to all the meetings and don't have the history. So this was more of a request for help me understand how this works and how we got here from someone like myself that likes to see the data. If you have the data and you have the numbers and you know how many boats are coming and going, and you look at the fees and you understand all the logic. By the way, there was absolutely nothing about residential fees. It was all commercial. And it was a lot of it based on the traffic that we see going up and down the road, a number of boats that are coming and going, and the desire to educate themselves. That was it.
right.
So there was absolutely no, what are you guys doing? In the sense of, we don't think it's being done right. It's like, what are you guys doing? How can we better understand what's going on and therefore maybe do a better job of working together? That was it.
Well, I appreciate that. It makes me feel better, and well,
As far as the 2-hour warning, and I agree, I mean, when you feel that it's, I tend to read agendas into things that happen like that. There was.
part of my job is to make sure the commission is treated reasonably. And this is the first time that I can recall in a long time to do this, where we had something come up this quick. We were looking for answers for. That's why I'm finding Michelle. So I believe you. Bill, you had something else.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that this commission deals with all the time throughout history is the balancing of interests within the community. You know, there are people who are like, gee, I really need my dock put in. And other people are like, that crane is ugly, you know, and we all have to, you know, so we work through each one of those little things as time comes by. I don't have a clear recollection of all of it because it predates my gray matter, but that property, as the waterfront evolved, before there were the condos, when Irish's had moved a used building down and was doing whatever they were doing that worked so well over time. There was considerable pushback when we wanted to do $5. And I think what led to that was the state provided money, we put in the launch ramp, and then we were having trouble because people were power loading and it was undermining the ramp and it was expensive to fix. And it's like, well, we're spending all this money and none of these guys are doing anything except trashing the junk. So that's where the $5 came from. And then over time, you know, it's like, well, you know, should we do $5 every time Irish's pulls through? That doesn't make sense. You know, it didn't at the time. Maybe that's what council would like to do. But all of these things evolve over time and of course are negotiable. So if there's a particular issue, I think we'd love to address it. If it's just a question of whether we think it's fair or not, I think I'd make that motion that, you know, at the time that we did this, that's what we thought was fair. But you know, I like data. You know, if they want to try to engineer some other thing that would be more fair, you know, that maybe every boat that gets launched by a commercial entity has to have a $35 season pass or $5 a launch or something like that. I mean, you're creating more administrative overhead, which is something that we're trying to not create more of. But you know, whether it should be 600 or 750 or 29.95 or whatever, that's debatable as well. But I think that's what I would say is that generally we think it's fair based on where we are, But, I mean, the fact that we changed it by a lot a year ago indicates that, you know, we move, maybe not every time the wind shifts, but, you know, we're evolving towards a more perfect union or whatever it is we're working on here. So
I did not, I can speak as one of five. There was never any intent to take over or to suggest to the Harbor Commission what should be done. Again, this was an educational
Yes,
request.
that's,
The Harbor Commission is here for a reason. You have the expertise, you have the understanding. I started coming to these meetings years ago because I didn't know left from right. Right, so I've learned as I go, but this board and any other board or commission, I would defend aggressively. But that's why you exist. You have the expertise. Council relies on that. I would take the high road, as Jim said, and take the request for education as a good thing because people want to know more.
we're all on the same team.
Yes, we are.
Exactly.
I've
So
had
there's
one,
no agenda.
the two license thing, which document is that part of?
Oh, the rules and regulations, so section 3, other commercial licenses, page 8 of the
I thought
Marina.
we did the 2 for Irish Wall Street, independently of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, may have, and that's,
That's my recollection of that.
Yeah, if we need to change that to fit what we're doing, then maybe.
it's not an urgent, that's just something that came up, a side note, yeah.
I can remember the years, you know, we reacted at this table and a council supported because we don't make policy here, we just recommend. As various demands came for use of the waterfront, whether it was fishing charter or sailing charter. One year we had 3 sailing charters and no fishing charters. One year we had 2 fishing charters, 3 sailing charters. We had to go. And as long as they fit, and in our judgment, it felt that it was compatible use with what was going on in there. Those numbers can be fluid. It's almost a defensive tactic, so that it gives us the opportunity to allow it if we think it makes sense, but we don't have to if we don't think we want to. So. And I think we ended up with those 2 commercial things based on a request from the commercial operators. And we looked at it in a different manner than the other, than those, like a sailing and a fishing charter type of thing. And maybe we need to clarify the language in that. I don't know. Michael, you had your hand up like twice.
Yes, thank you. Michael Esposito, Irish Boat Shop. While we're all airing our feelings here, I would like to air my feelings because I was at the meeting Monday night. I'm agreeing and disagreeing. If there's an educational component, that should have come to the Harbor Commission, asked for information. That was at a public meeting. And personally, Irish Boat Shop, I felt we were under attack because just as it's happening at the table, IBS is being mentioned far more than Wallstrom's, and we both use that facility. So it was more than a call for information because there were discussions of eliminating commercial uses. There were discussions of maybe there's 2 or 3 at the time commercial licenses. Well, if Burt Lake Marina is the first one to give their application, they get the license. That's really not how this has played out over the years. I appreciate what JB is saying. We apply for our license each year, but I'd have a pretty big issue if someone snuck in there before me, whatever that means. I mean, there is no deadline that I'm aware of. So there has to be a little bit of give and take. But that meeting Monday night, for me, I felt was very much directed at commercial users, of which we're one of 3 or 4. And I didn't feel, you know, I happened to see that the meeting was happening on Sunday night, so I was there. But the way public meetings happen, you don't always know. And it's the same with this meeting. I like to attend the Harbor Commission, but I felt compelled to be here tonight because honestly, that felt like an attack on the commercial users at Fort Park. So that's my feeling of how that meeting went.
So part of the council member Rondell, when she brought this up to the May 17th meeting, was one of the concerns that she heard from residents was commercialization of Fort Park. So this was in that context. And that obviously is more to it than just the launch ramp, the commercial licenses. There's dock and dredge. There's the ferry, which is a nonprofit, but there's part of the overall uses there. So this was part of that overall context.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kyle.
No, sorry. And to Victor, some of that context came from using public property for private entities, not just the marina. You're talking up at Kiwanis Park and all that. That was Mr. Rondell's question in general. is whether they use that, and then just, I go to every meeting. And it was a reference to that, but as well as her general comment was using public property for a private entity in general. That's one of her last statements, I thought. Like, it doesn't matter if it's the water or somewhere else, or the Zorn Park for a wedding. It's always been one of her
Well,
touches.
I hope that everybody has heard, I listened to a little bit of the history in there, that the commercial aspect of that actually is a balance between revenue generation for the city and the fact that the way we ended up coming up with that solution of giving out those 2 licenses, and you're right, Michael, it's not just IDS, it's certainly Wellstone's on it, and I hope I tried to convey that. It actually frees up space down at that park for John Q. Public, which is part of our goal here, is to make that ramp available to everybody. So, and the added bonus, and I've seen this happen, where they actually help people back their boat in there. I've seen them take the battery charger off of the truck when they're backing up, when a guy won't start his boat, go over there and start his boat, and I don't see, other than maybe a 6-pack going someplace else, any bill going out for it. So that's been our challenge here, is to balance that kind of stuff. And if, and I'm happy to come, and so would anybody from this table, to council and talk about that, if that's where we're going with this thing.
Well, any topic that comes up in a public meeting, whether it's a city council meeting or this or any of the board of commission, takes its own path as to where it goes and what questions are asked and what it grows into. And I clarified that I speak for 1 to 5, but at the end of that discussion, it did come back to the request for data to try to understand what was going on. If you took it
I would
as
just
an
recommend
Irish.
within the city system, that could have been done. The data could have, the education could have happened and then decided this needs to be.
And I agree, but when a council member brings up a topic, he goes with it.
You kind of circle that around, when you look at the 3rd question on here, should we eliminate a commercial rate and instead require each boat owner to pull their own launch permit? That's a pretty specific
That was
question.
That was for me, because that was a proposal I suggested.
I mean, that's not an educational thing. That's asking us to determine if what we're doing is right, or should we act on this suggestion? So, what can the Harbor Commission do now to help with council? I mean, we've talked about how, I think we've justified why we are where we are. And I feel comfortable, defending that position, certainly on the daily pass side and also with the commercial thing. We did just double the fees almost last fall based on some political input that we got from council on this thing. What would you like?
Well, based on council would like, based on the end of that meeting, A was educational history, so we got that part of that here. I don't know if it's 100% complete, because I still don't see a rationale for why there's a difference, a defendable rationale. So for example, if we were to have legal scrutiny, someone would challenge our fees, right? We would have to justify why this rate is different than another rate. So we don't have
Which
the commercial. So for IBS or Wellstone, when they're launching a boat on behalf of a resident or a non-resident, that could be depending on how many users they have. I think Michael, you mentioned there's 25 in the valet service, maybe 26 that use the valet service. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Without it in front of me, 25,
Right,
26.
it was around there. So, without knowing how many times they launch, are they doing it daily, or are they doing it? So we don't know how to compare that to the residential rate, the $5.
Well, I think you can. If he's got 35 users or 25 users and it's $35, if they were to buy their own seasonal pass on that thing, that's
$600.
and funny, that matches the rate we're charging them.
What a coincidence.
25 times 35 would be 900 something.
So we're
Well, I'm
off
just
by-
saying, but if
We're off by
that,
$300, but that still doesn't take away the value that the city gets by having the parking spaces freed up, and actually, frankly, the free help that we give for folks.
and that may be, I think
It may
that's
go
absolutely true.
smoother down there on busy days.
Well, that's absolutely true, but when we're looking at fees are a narrow sense of thing. When you're charging someone a fee, it has to be defendable if it's ever challenged. I'm not saying this will ever be challenged, but
I
you
just
have
gave you
to,
3 reasons why it's defendable.
for why the fee is different. I don't know if that would withstand scrutiny in a challenge. I mean,
Can I ask you a question? You brought up, the whole history and is it supposed to be tied to expenses? So what expenses is this actually being tied to? I mean, is it a volume discount to charge a commercial fee because if they're launching so many boats at $5? at a time, or, I mean, what expenses does $12,000 cover? Mariana at the launch dock or repairs of the launch dock? I mean, I'm trying to figure out how this is tied into the cost of the operation somehow to justify the cost of $5 or $400 for the commercial, or $35 for the individual, whatever.
Do we
See what I'm
break
saying?
out costs in the ledger at the city as to whether it was a Ford Park related?
Well, we do have for, yes, I mean,
Launch dock, yeah.
yes, for the launch permit for the revenues taken in.
Yeah, I'm talking about the
Costs.
like the lawn mowing and the trash collection, and we haven't repaired the asphalt for a while, but we did a little bit of it.
I don't know how
Not
specific.
going
it is,
in and
but we
out.
do.
Yeah,
We do break it down. I don't know how specific, if it gets how specific, but we do let know what, if it's for Ford Park, yes, we do have that.
and then there's something in
The
here.
reality is, when we talk about expenses in Ford Park specifically, it would be almost impossible for that business to be totally self-supporting and turn profit. Because we can't really charge more than $5 or double it and charge $10. It's not going to make any significant difference in the revenue that we make because there isn't that many launches that happen down there.
Do we know how many a year?
Yes, we have records with that kind of stuff.
Curious about that.
That's how we balance out against it.
Divide the revenue by $5.
Mhm,
So that's one of the constraints that you have on that side of the thing.
mhm.
We could charge $50 a launch down there, but we would probably have no money because nobody would do it. They go to the other side of the bay. So you got to stay somewhere in a competitive environment of your circle of influence. And we are. I mean, that's clear that we are. So the commercial thing, if we charged them 2,000, it wouldn't be each. It really wouldn't make any difference in how much money we make down there in the big picture of trying to repave that place, which is going to cost $100 grand. So we make an extra $3,000 a year down there. That doesn't really solve the problem. So our thing is to try to be as efficient as we can with how we run it, charge a competitive price that fits in with not only the neighborhood costs, but also with how we feel about handling our own people here around on this side of the bay, and then do the best we can. And we make the money at the other end and then moorings. So.
There's a part of the resident and non-resident fees are different with commercial, and it makes sense. And we sat at this table and talked a lot about why we did that. And somewhere buried in there is there, but my memory is they support the city. I mean, all of us donate. If we live in the city, we are contributing to the funds. They contribute a ton. And so the difference is the fact that they are a local tax-paying organization to our city. That's my memory of where we got the distinction.
Between the residential and non.
Yes,
Business
between
revenue.
the business commercial and the business non. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
is, I mean, it's appropriate.
Yeah.
At our table, we agreed that was appropriate. If that helps answer.
And there wasn't anybody on this table from Walston or Irish at the time when we were going through that. So it wasn't like they were self-serving. So I think from my perspective, that's a clearly defensible rationale for why commercial fees are what commercial fees are.
Another question was, so that's the educational part, then the second part would be, does the Harbor Commission have any advice to council on whether or not, data and how that data should be compiled if if council wants to relook at those fees? If collecting that data will help determine whether those fees are appropriate or not. I believe that was part of the request.
question, and I remember, and I could be wrong. Gray cells do have an expiration date, but at the last budget meeting that the Harbor Commission had, it came up and it was agreed that it would be a good idea to have the commercial users.
Keep track.
Not, we weren't saying we want a report, we want it monthly, we want this, but on an annual basis, give us a report on how many launches and how many boats you launch in a year. Sanity check. But you came up with a back of the envelope rationale for what it would be for, a season pass for 20, and it's in the ballpark. But you're putting together the information that I think is being asked for.
But nothing wrong with that, as both you and Victor and Billy have said on that. So I wouldn't have any trouble. And I do remember that conversation that we were going to do that
We also got COVID in the middle and everything was not the same. And so I remember backing down. I mean, it's like, what were we gonna learn from last year?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. So I don't have any trouble, Victor, if we would direct the commercial licenses, staff write them a letter and ask them for a report on how many launches they had on there. Yeah, Michael?
So we all know that data is useless unless it's compiled in a logical manner. So we can provide you with how many times we launch a boat or this, that, or the other thing. But it doesn't matter if you don't have the data for everyone else that's using the launch ramp. Because if I just simply come in and say, I did 15,000 launches, what does that tell you? Other than, wow, that's a lot of launches. But we don't know how many launches happen at the ramp. And then how do we accommodate the things, the goodwill that you say? Because that's a very valid point. We launch 2 to 3 times faster than the average customer. We don't park in the area. So there's all these other components that somehow have to be calculated. Just simply saying how many boats do you launch is not data. It's just a number.
Well, and that's valid because, part of that is valid because, you know, we don't know how many some seasonal pass holders might launch every day. And we don't know that. And some might launch once a week or once every 2 weeks. We don't know that.
I thought it was clear today that we're not worried about the daily guy or the season.
We're
pass
not, but
guy.
if we're trying to compare why we're charging the commercial users a certain rate, we need to know, compared to what, why are we charging the residential that rate? If it's based on number of
residential rate, because competitively, we can't go any higher without losing customers.
So then should we be basing the residential rate not on data, but that commercial fees on data? Is that what the Harbor Commission or you're saying? So we know how to
What
make
I'm
a
saying
rate.
is, Victor, if you want to sell socks downtown and you've got 2 sock stores either side of each other, and one is selling the same sock at $5 and the next one's over here is selling it at 50, you're going to buy the $5 sock. We're already charging as much as we can charge competitively in this environment.
JB, I understand that. What I'm trying to say is if we're gonna use data to tell the commercial users, this is how much you're gonna be paying. I think what Michael is saying is why aren't you using data to tell the residents how much they should be paying? Why are you using different set of standards to give the commercial users a separate fee versus the residential?
Am I missing something?
We don't have like an algorithm.
Right. But I think that's what Michael is trying to say, is that number is gonna be,
Just
The
by
only
itself,
reason-
it's just a number. It's
The
not
only
relevant.
reason the data that they would generate would be good is if council decided they wanted to take, if he had 25 boats and he launched them 25 times each, and they wanted to do the math and that became the commercial rate, then it works that way. At this table, we already decided when we first came up with the commercial rate, and then we raised it last year, that probably makes some sense given what we see down there for activity, and we factored in the goodwill stuff, so maybe it doesn't add up to exactly the dollar you're at. But that number seemed to fit.
But I think what you're saying is you want to know how many launches are part of the commercial launch group versus as part of the whole. So what is the whole? I mean, how many launches are there every summer and how much of that is considered commercial?
Well, here's
I
the
mean,
rub.
that's a problem. We can't really count on it, right? We can't count the
Unless
individual
we
ones.
staff that place
Unless we're-
24/7,
Right.
we are not gonna know that, unless we put gates up.
Tried that.
And the guy will
Yeah,
be back.
let's do that again.
See, that's where this whole thing is. You gotta be reasonable about what, is the data from the residential stuff worth losing money? It's gonna cost us $25,000 a year to staff that to get an exact number. At this table, we've gone, we're competitive, we're pretty close. It seems, why waste money?
How much
we
are we
can
gonna
get the
charge
data
at
commercially if
Columbus
you
Park
want.
with the rope to it?
Or the magic carpet.
The request for data was exclusively related to the commercial activity. During the conversation, it came up that there was some saw it, I never saw it, the connection between residential and commercial. I don't think they should be tied together. I think they're blatantly different activities. The request was simply to ask, not demand, to ask, and the format for each of the commercial users is up to them. In fact, if I were one, I would use it as an opportunity to communicate to the Harbor Commission and to council. Simply, we have X concierge service boats, and this is how many we do a year, and the back of the envelope rationale were pretty damn. It didn't go beyond any of the other discussions.
So I'm fine getting the data on the commercial side. But Karen, to answer your question, to try to get every residential user,
Possible.
it's not cost effective.
Yeah, I understand.
I don't really think it would do anything but cost the city money.
And that varies year by year. I mean, one year it cost me $35 to launch my boat. Yeah, that's just the way it was that year.
Because you went $5 at a time.
No, because I paid my fee and my schedule, I got to launch it one
One
time.
launch, okay.
If we look at it, that Wallstrom and Irish are not the users, but the people who own the boats that they're launching are the users and apply exactly the same seasonal rates, both residential and non-residential, then we're treating everybody the same. Well, I think we should examine that a bit more. And I don't know how they'd be, whether we would literally get a permit from each of those individuals, or Wallstrom and Irish could just provide us a list and, you know, we can fund through them or whatever, but that literally we would get $35 or $60
Per boat.
per boat.
The headache I see with that approach, Fred, and I understand where you're coming from, is that doesn't figure in the parking space that's not being used on the 4 or 5 or 6 people they launch every morning, whatever it is on that thing. It makes it available for everybody else on that ramp.
And I also, I mean, to me, that crosses the line and it's interfering with how the commercial users run the businesses. I wouldn't go there.
I guess the question is, is the launch ramp permit fee, is it inclusive of that? Is it just to launch? And then having a tag for your trailer or car to be there is just a benefit of having a launch permit fee? I mean,
As far as the boats, the large parking spaces are, you have to have a permit of some sort in order to occupy that. So the parking is included.
the old permit, I don't know, Mike, if you know about this, but the old permits, did they used to have the MC number? And then we changed it to the,
Trailer license number.
yeah, so it used to be the MC number and for the boat, then we changed it to the trailer license number. So at some point, that
Doesn't it also
was
say
top.
that you can have up to 3 vessels?
The permit's right here. It doesn't have an MC number. It has a trailer number. So it's not assigned to a boat, it's assigned to a trailer, actually.
It used to be.
That's because your staff can go through that lot and tie the trailer to the ticket or the season pass, where before the ticket was tied to the boat. And he had to be there to catch the guy and make sure the MC number matched the boat as he was loading on a trailer before he got out of town. It didn't work. That's why we changed that all over. So I think we got a good system. And I like, you know, where you were going, Fred, makes sense. If we made everybody that Michael and Wallstrom's did business with have a seasonal permit for their valet service, that would be easy. But it doesn't take into account the fact that they're not using the facility like everybody else is. Yes, Mike.
So that is part of the discussion, or maybe the confusion. If we go back to 2008, prior to that, there was no valet service in Harbor Springs, including us. And the commercial license was really used for the 2 businesses to use the ramp. So we would deliver boats, we would test run boats. Sometimes the boat's just easier to run through the ramp. Valet has been added, I think specifically by us, I can't speak for Wallstrom's. And that's a new service, and it's the high profile service. It's kind of what everybody sees. So there is this possibility of kind of splitting those 2, but if you said to me, you have to pay $35 for every customer you launch, well, I'm that customer sometimes, right? So where's my fee for my boats I personally own, or I mean, the boat shop owns that we're demoing or we're doing test runs on? There's a lot of uses that fall into the commercial envelope, and that's what it was for decades. So yes, we've now introduced this new service, and it increases the flow through Ford Park. But those 2 things are quite different. So there could be some logic applied to the valet service, but now you're getting pretty specific because, you know, next year we'll create a different service. That's what businesses do. Whatever the demand is, you create a service for it.
Yes.
I just have one question. We've been talking about IBS and Wallstrom. How do we treat the other 2 commercial businesses, Meyer and the Outfitter?
So, I mean, they pay the same rate.
That's what I
Yeah,
mean.
but how do you do it? Yeah, it's,
How do you collect data from that? How many kayaks they launch?
so that's where I think
Which
we're.
Meyer is it? Kevin or Terry? Terry Meyer.
Meyer Marine Service, I don't know. But I think that's where Michael Esposito was going with, that, you know, the original commercial license, you didn't have the valet license at that time. So all these commercial groupings, Wallstrom, IBS, Outfitter, which was added on a little bit later, they all have the same commercial license for your commercial activity. And then the valet license gets added on. I think that's, like you said, that's an increased activity that people have been seeing. And that's where I would think if it was a recommendation to council, or if anyone wanted to support it, would be that $35 per boat that's in the valet service. That's if, I think that makes more sense than saying, all right, every boat that IBS launches as part of their commercial operations needs to get that season, because that doesn't make sense to me. I think what we're talking about is someone who's using that launch ramp, just like another resident is using that launch ramp.
Or non-resident.
Or non-resident, exactly.
Except when I launch my boat, I park my
Right.
trailer and my car there. When someone who has valet service, they get their boat in and out, and they've saved a space for the community. I just want to say, I hope this answers the questions. You can see none of these were willy-nilly, just here's a cool idea. We didn't do that. And sitting here, I've been on this for a while, but there's some things I don't know. Like I didn't know why the trailers changed, the tax. But what we're really after is knowledge, and I think you've done a great job of explaining it. And I'm very comfortable. We took every one of these fees and worked very hard to come up with why we did it, what we did. And I would let council know how well we did on it and see if that satisfies them.
And Laura, just to respond, I think you made a good point there about, of course, the parking. We're always saying that the parking, they're not taking up parking space. And then maybe you, in your fee system, you say, all right, $35 if you have a car, $25 if you're not, you don't have a car to park your car there. I'm just saying that if.
Chief, you want to figure that one out? Saturday afternoon?
I mean, this is about offering ideas and talking about it. That's where, we can, but well, council want to know some history and then possible ideas of whether it's fair or not, and if there's a way that we can collect data or make a fair system. If it's, I'm just.
It seems clear to
It's
me
even
that
tougher because there are times when I keep the boat behind my house. I bring it down here. There's no place for me to park it. So I ended up taking it back to the house because down here is packed up too. So am I gonna get a rebate because I park it behind my house now? That's going too far.
Or launches a boat down there, parked down there though.
I get it, and that's cool.
Even Irish and Wallstrom, I'm down, I work here and I see them either park at the overflow lot or now with all the rentals is they take their trailer home and they get a ride down here. Michael knows better than I do, but not everybody who launches, there's a lot more boats launched down there than there are trailers there.
And we're thankful for that,
And
because we
right
don't
now,
have the space for it.
We've already had so many inquiries about Old Street overflow compared to the last 5 years already. So I anticipate it'll be higher this year.
Aren't you glad it's not a dog park? But to get back on topic, it is clear the council would like to get some data. That's what I read from this. And we did talk about this last fall, so I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the commercial users to provide us at the end of the season with the numbers of launches that they have. And I think you kind of got to do it by each boat that they have in their valet service and how many times that boat goes in. And then, yes, Sue.
Yeah, if we knew what question you were trying to answer with the data, it would be easier for us to report the data to you.
I think you and I are going to have to go to council and ask it.
Yeah, I don't understand what fairness question we're trying to answer, and I don't understand what information gap we're trying to fill. And we're certainly willing to be good partners in this. We're not trying to take advantage of the system or anything like that, but it's easier to provide good information if we know why it's needed.
If I may, there was no fairness issue discussed.
It was absolutely a fairness issue, over and over again.
Yeah.
On some, absolutely.
Maybe I was just focused on the data.
That word was used at least 5 or 6 times.
But again, only if you try to equate residential and commercial, and I don't. I think they're radically different. I don't think we should attempt to equate. That's one guy.
Let's back off from
But
whatever came out of
This
council.
recording,
Let's go back to last fall. We did talk at this board about coming up with data on commercial stuff. And irregardless of how that data gets used, it isn't unreasonable for us to ask a commercial licensed user to tell us how many boats he launched during the course of that season. And then we can go from there. And I would make a motion that we ask the staff to communicate that to the commercial users and with feedback after the end of September would be enough, I think, for us.
Can I again ask why you want to know?
Well, actually, you can. We're being really good about our back and forth here, but this public comment at the end of this thing, you can ask this. And then we can, with that data, we'll take it to, we'll submit it, we'll talk about it at our October meeting and see if we want to do anything. So I made a motion. Is there a second for it?
Second.
Discussion?
No discussion. Do we care the nature of the launch, or do we just want to know the total number of launches as opposed to we're demoing about, we're testing about, we're delivering about, it's part of the valet service? Do we, for our purposes, care? To get to the, is this fair sort of thing?
JB, I still personally would like to know how we would, get the data from outfitter. Is it per kayak launch? Who don't even use the ramp usually, they use the kayak launch. And from Terry Meyer, what kind of data are we gonna get from him? It seems like we're concentrating on the two big ones, but I don't know where we're gonna get equal data.
I guess the other question is, what are we gonna do with the information? I mean, that's kind of where I keep in my head asking, like, where are we gonna go with all this? What is it the city was bringing up as an issue? I don't know. I couldn't attend the meeting the other night, so I guess that's what my question is. What are we gonna do with it?
Yeah, look at.
I guess the thing I'm thinking about is that I wasn't here when the commercial licenses were established, but it seems to me that a commercial user like Wallstrom or IBS, they have certain things they do, and they launch their own boats. They launch the boats they use to do their business if they're maintaining boats when residents aren't here, things like that. That's part of their business. And I have no problem with having a commercial license for that. But I think we also gave them commercial licenses to reduce their bookkeeping and all the hassle they have to go through to get a permit to launch each boat. And if they have to be permitted, if they get a seasonal one, it's a lot of work that, I think the boat owners should be doing, but more and more we have owners up here who prefer to pay someone to do their work. And I think that's where these commercial operations are, is they're making money by doing these other people's work. And I hate to put more burden on them.
If we don't know what question we're trying to answer, like Sue said, like what's the purpose and where are we going with it? And if it's to satisfy somebody's wish to know numbers, it's not good enough for me. I'm a numbers girl, so.
I think part of this is we clearly don't know any detail about what happens within those commercial licenses, we as a Harbor Commission. And maybe that's why we need some data, is so that we know. And for the people that hold these licenses, correct me if this becomes a big labor issue. But if we know how many launches are related to sales, how many launches are related to the maintenance shop, and simple, your annual storage people drop and pick up against any valet service. Now yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead. Just when you.
For outfitters, again, what are they doing down there? How many canoes, whatever, maybe there should be some variance in this, but we don't know that because we don't have any information. Maybe it's time just to check.
We don't charge anything for an individual to launch a kayak.
Yeah.
I would just question how much the city wants to get into the business practices of businesses that are, a big part of our local economy and just.
Well, my motion is directly related to 50% of the questions that we were handed or learned about 3.5 hours ago now. So
Why couldn't we just set a rate, and if they don't want to pay it, then,
That's pretty much.
That's what we did. And now,
And I think we've learned at the table that what they're charging is a reason, a defendable number at some level. Is it the most we could charge? No. Is it the least we could charge? No. It's somewhere in the middle. On that.
and
So there's a
out of my
motion.
memory, the two organizations that are involved the most in this supported an increase in that. So the thought that they're trying to chip away and get some good deal out of the city is just, I find it.
There's been a motion made and supported that we ask the staff to solicit data for launches as it relates to their commercial licenses. We've had some discussion on it. I think we need to vote on it. If you don't like it, vote no. If you like it, vote yes. But we got to get this motion off the table. So why don't you do a roll call vote? Is everybody clear on what we're voting on? It'd be up to staff to ask what data they want. I mean, these questions came from council to staff to us. So at this table, we've been very comfortable with looking at this from a 30,000 foot view, and obviously it's obvious they want to get a little closer. So
If your motion turns it back to council.
well, we turn it to staff, who's trying to do what
Find out
council was
what
asking
council
them to do.
wants.
Then we can go from there. And you know, if you don't like it, vote no. So
What data is most meaningful for us who have to make recommendations?
by the end of September, we would have that data.
Yeah,
And
but
that
I
would give
mean,
us enough time for our October meeting to look at that stuff.
I mean, the questions that we should ask the licensees needs to be data that satisfies our ability to make a decision, not.
We haven't felt the need at this table to have this kind of data.
I understand that, but
So I'm trying to answer the questions that have come to us. And that's what the motion is about.
Was the contention, I couldn't attend city council meeting, was the contention that the commercial license isn't enough to pay for the cost of, you know, IBS or Wallstrom's launching?
That was
those?
not, that was not.
That was not the contention, so. I
The
mean,
question was to see if we have data, does that data justify the fees that we are charging? That's really my take of that, and I know different council members had different opinions and different discussion, but my take was, does the data justify? And I'm not saying that you do or don't need data, but that was the question, was get the recommendation from Harbor Commission on whether or not, because it was brought up at the last year's Harbor Commission meeting about getting data. And the reason the Harbor Commission might have wanted data last year for when we were raising the fees might be different than what the council members' reasons for wanting the data. But there was that request from the Harbor Commission for data as well as now from council. So what purpose, I feel like the different people will do different things with that data. Is it needed? Will it help us make a decision on whether or not those fees are good or not? I don't know. I don't know that question. Do we need to see that data to know that? I don't know. But that's what council, I think, is looking for, that specific question.
Well, we have them.
I just, when we voted that we would like to have the fees raised, that went to council, and
Okay.
council approved it. That's why they're set at what they are right now. Just because we have another council, are they questioning the decision that council previous to them made on our recommendation? I mean, I think coaching is education, but
We can't predict to understand
know.
what they're doing. I think you need to look at these 4 questions
Mhm.
and draw your own conclusions as to what the intent is on this. We've heard Victor's explanation.
Okay.
We've heard a councilman's explanation. We heard from folks in the audience who were at that meeting, and there's some conflicting viewpoints as to what the focus was on that. And I respect them all. I'm not judging them, but that's what we've heard today.
Mhm.
So if you're uncomfortable with the motion or doing that, then don't support the motion. We'll go on to the next one. But we got to get over this bridge one way or the other.
I agree. Let's reread the motion, just so everybody's clear on what the motion is.
What do you got?
So the motion was for the Harbor Commission to direct or ask staff to ask the commercial operators. And what I'm not sure is if we're talking about just IBS or Wallstrom or all 4 of them, all 4 of them for data related to their commercial launches at Ford Park. And then to share that with Harbor Commission and by the end of September.
Everybody clear on that?
And there was a motion by Jim Bartlett and a second by Flicker.
Then let's do a roll call vote.
All right, JB,
No.
Flicker Reagan,
No.
Tim Fletcher Rice,
No.
Fred Rockwitz,
Yeah.
Tom Grant,
Yes.
Dick Schiller,
No.
Bill McCullough,
No.
Laura Kors,
No.
and Karen Stroud.
No.
All right, motion fails. Chair, I just like, we do have a ZBA meeting at 5:30, so I don't know if you.
I gotta be at that too, so I'm just, we're gonna quit this at 5:29.
We're just getting him warmed up here.
Takes up a long.
That was a great discussion. If staff or council ever wants to talk to anybody at the table about this stuff, or if it's time, maybe we do a joint meeting between council and commission. Or because it's clear that there's, from my perspective, that some of what has happened in the past isn't clearly understood by everybody, maybe at both tables on this thing.
The recording of this meeting has become a great instructional tool. So for anybody who's interested in learning. Okay.
That's as if you believe my recollection of history. Nobody in this room should trust that. Harbormaster update, Michael.
We'll make this really short and sweet, as JB just mentioned. We have a ZB meeting in what, 15 minutes? First off, I want to thank Dana Milder for all the work she's been doing with Marina Park. If anybody has a chance to get down there and take a look, it looks great. It really does look good. It's a major improvement of what we've had before. So kudos to you and your folks. 3 new employees this year to start things off. And I also brought back Laura Graham, Tom's niece, I guess, yeah. So Laura's kind of leading the charge. The 3 new employees all have boating experience and really personable kids. So I'm really stoked to get them going this season. So far, so good. And I think we're going to have a great season this year, as we're getting a ton of phone calls for what they assume is going to be a reservation, which we do not offer. So I think we're going to have another good year. We've had a great start to the season. We've had a lot of general maintenance. We've been cleaning power poles, as JB might have noticed you down there the other day. Deep cleaning the Harbormaster building after a hard winter, and the Ford Park building got reworked as well. Everybody noticed there's solar panels in the Ford Park building now. I think that's all up to speed and been inspected. What else? Several boaters have taken advantage of our unlimited stay policy to the 5th of July, unlike last year, given COVID and late launch for a lot of boats. Last year, for the same day, May 31st, we had $709 in the till. As of May 31st of this year, we have $11,000, so pretty massive increase. I think a lot of that's due to that policy and the fact that a lot of people like to take advantage of the unlimited stay, and the fact that we raised the rates this year.
And vaccinations.
And vaccinations, yeah.
Science.
Which is beautiful.
Science.
Another party I'd like to congratulate is Wallstrom D&D. They've done a great work for us, and a lot of great work for the rest of the harbor this year. At Lucas's suggestion, I think Victor and I talked about this past spring, we reutilized the 5-foot section of dock that we put in 2 years ago at the transition dock at Fort Park. Replaced that with a 10-foot or 10-foot wide last year. We repurposed the old trestle dock from Fort Park and one floating section to improve access to the dock down at the Courtesy dock next to the Marina, which has been great. Wallstrom did a great job installing that. That dock is a lot safer. It's also pinned together at each union. So if we get any kind of safes, they're not going to float off the pins and disappear and have to get Wallstrom's back. Let's see what else. And that 5-foot wide dock is major more useful than it was before. So it's been great. A few changes in seasonal slips. We had 2 boaters who did not renew, and we added 2 off the wait list. And the 2 off the wait list actually assumed bigger slips than they'd anticipated taking advantage of, but they did pay full freight. So that kept us about even with income from, from docks. Moorings, again, were 66 out of 66. We did encourage people to observe the 29-day limit that we waived last year. Got a lot of response to that. 76 out of 76 for kayak spots. We did have 5 people, to my recollection, give up their kayak spots because they were uncomfortable with the $50 raise. But we had no issue selling that to the next 6 people on the wait list. So we're back to full speed again with that.
And Mike, I just
I'm sorry.
for that, we sent a letter to all kayak holders saying that, just say, if you plan on using it at all this year, we ask that you give it up. So that kind of helped people who were like, oh yeah, I'm not using kayaks this year. So they just give up their, yeah.
Good for
And
you.
we also included that in the dock and mooring contracts to let them know that we did raise the rates last year. To let them know that if they were uncomfortable with the increase, then they could give up their spots, so. And that wasn't why the two voters gave up their seasonal slips. They both got out of voting, so.
Did we have much turnover in moorings?
Yeah, we had 6 different people give up their buoys, and again, so easy to replace them.
10%,
Pardon me?
10%.
Yeah.
So we had a pretty good year for turnover all the way around. I think.
Yep.
Which is good if you're on the waiting list.
Yeah. So all in all, I think we're off to a good start. It's great to see the Mohawks back in the dock. And that's about all I have for you guys. And hopefully we'll have a much, and regatta is at 84 boats as of right now. All the big guys are coming back. We'll have 7 52-footers, 3 70-footers, a whole bunch of boats over 50 feet. So looking at a good crowd again this year. And Irish has a ton of boats headed their way with the small boats. So
I'd also like to add to that is the ferry contacted me, and they said, hopefully they hope to get out running next 2 weeks. They had some delays, so you might see them out in the next couple of weeks.
And back to the barge,
mhm.
they're almost done with their work, and isn't there
June 15th is
June
deadline.
15th is the deadline? Yes, so they're anticipating being out of here by the 15th.
That's when I talked to them last, yes.
And I
How
talked
long
to
ago
Zach.
was it? I'm just curious.
About a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Zach on the phone.
Aren't you?
Well, he was at the council meeting on Monday as well.
I'm really hopeful we don't have to beat him up on that 15th, because he didn't have any weather excuses this year and all that other stuff. And I know they've been working hard, so hopefully that works.
I have a question about the barge. How has it been this year with having the boom down at night or when they're over here on the pier?
I haven't gotten a complaint about it, but I haven't, that doesn't mean it was or wasn't down, but I haven't got a complaint about it.
I haven't seen it up, but the low flying birds are upset now. High flying birds are happy, but the low. They've done a better job this year, for sure.
Yep, they have.
Thanks, Michael. Place looks great down there. Any comments from commissioners? We have a meeting in July. What's the date on that?
Oh, I didn't include that. Yes,
See if we can,
I think so.
July 14th at 4 o'clock is our next meeting. And you're hearing, thank you, everybody, for your discussion today. That was a good one. I appreciate that. And with that, hearing no other business, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Yeah.